Now I'd like to welcome David Clayton. He is the Regional Director and Outreach Coordinator for Families Against Narcotics, a Michigan-based organization founded in 2007 to raise awareness about addiction and help erase the stigma associated with the disease. Aside from overseeing the organization's chapters, David spends his time presenting to a wide variety of groups, from high school students to hospital personnel, from medical conferences to athletic programs, and from businesses to university students and faculty. He is also active in Hope Not Handcuffs, a Families Against Narcotics initiative launched in 2017 to provide easier access to treatment for those seeking, sorry, my camera. I'm sorry about that. He's okay, we're all okay. Okay, to provide easier access to treatment for those seeking help with substance use disorder. David serves as the director for the Macomb County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, president of the Macomb Community Adult Drug Court nonprofit, and vice president of My Care Health Center. So without further ado, David.
Thanks, Marissa, and thank you everybody for being here today. I offer you to turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable, like last time. Oh, look at that, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that when we segued from the last presenter into me, I think the last presenter, she talked a lot about compassion and stigma, which ironically enough is the title of this presentation, that compassion is greater than stigma. So I don't have a lot of slides, so that's kind of a good thing. I know a lot of times we sit through conferences and we have a lot of slides that we have to pay attention to, or being in school, we have a lot of PowerPoints that we look at. So I'm only going to share one slide, and it really kind of sums up about when we talk about the stigma of substance use disorder. So not only did obviously Marissa introduce myself as the regional director and the outreach coordinator of Families Against Narcotics, I'm also a person in long-term recovery from drugs and alcohol. I suffered from the disease of addiction for about 11 years of my life. And I share this with all of you because when you hear a bio or you see a picture in the program, or you see me in front of you today, what we think about when we think about the stigma of addiction is not what you see in that bio, not what you see in that picture. What we think about when we think about the stigma of addiction and alcoholism is the individual that's on the left and on the right. These pictures are in no chronological order, but I'm going to share with you today kind of a multitude of different things about when we talk about stigma and compassion. I would have added more of these lovely mugshots that I have over the years, but I didn't have enough room for them. But when I see all of this, I see someone who's lost, someone who didn't really have the resources, someone who struggled in silence for a long time. I see a son to a loving mother and father. But really what it is that every one of those pictures has a different story, right? And in the middle of that, I was speaking to the Michigan Association of Health Plans conference. It was a rather large conference of, 1,500 people, I think. And I was the keynote speaker at that conference. And I remember I was at the table and there was other medical professionals that were around me, and they started going through the agenda, and they got to like the last part, which was me, and they didn't know me was me sitting with them. And they started saying, I started hearing them talk, and they were saying things like, well, there's only one way to really deal with addiction, and that's just to let them all die. That'll cure everything. It was, yeah, well, they constantly steal everything, and so they get what's coming to them. And I sat back and I bit my tongue, which I don't do often. I speak what I feel, and then they introduced me They said, and now our keynote speaker is David Clayton, and then they welcomed me up to the stage. So I got up from my table, I pushed in my chair, I gave them a smile, and then I proceeded to go up and proceeded to do my presentation. And that is what we think about of the stigma of addiction, is how people perceive that, right? You're thinking about medical professionals that are talking about the disease of addiction the way they were. So today is going to be kind of a different, I think, I don't know, presentation for all of you, because I think that instead of me going in and talking about the epidemiology of SUD and the neuroscience of addiction, I think that the best way for me to kind of deliver this to you is just really give you lived experience, right? Because at the end of the day, that's all we ever really have is our lived experience of what we do. We think about, you know, when you go into and you do your rotations, you have experience that you gain throughout those times. You gain experience through your times in college for all of you. And that's what the avenue that I'm going to take today. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to kind of just tell you a story of myself, of what it was like, what happened, and then what it's like now. And then I'm going to kind of give you some different things that we are doing in the state of Michigan, and then actually at a national level too. So, you know, when I think about a lot of times people ask me like, well, what happened? You know, what was it in your life that made you go down the road of addiction? They look for things like, well, were you sexually assaulted? Were you mentally abused? Were you emotionally abused? Um, and the answer is no. Addiction, does it run as far in my family as back as I can trace? No, because I've traced it because I needed to find a reason of why I was the way that I was. I was raised by two loving parents. My mother was a high school secretary for 46 years. My father was a car salesman. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and I was raised in a household of morals and respect, and I knew what right from wrong was. And I was told that if I went down this path in life that was good, I would be awarded accordingly. If I went down another path, I would get what's coming to me. I look at it like this. When I was in the 8th grade, and it sounds kind of funny starting there, but that's kind of where I traced it back to, is that I was in the 8th grade and I was this scrawny little kid, and I had glasses and I had braces, and my mom picked out my clothes. And these kids in my grade, they picked on me. And so when I got into high school, I was like, I want to be something different, you know, and I wanted to rebel. And so I remember I changed my hairstyle. I begged my mom to let me get contacts. I got rid of my braces, and I was always told to, like, well, you need to find an out. You need to have an out. And I didn't really know what that out was, but I found it, and I found that through athletics. I was an exceptionally good baseball player. I followed the footsteps of my old man, and you know, that's what I did. And so baseball season tryouts came around. I tried out and I made the varsity team as a freshman, which was like the biggest thing that happened to me at my life at that point in time. And by the 3rd game, I was starting, and I remember on this team, I was the only freshman. It was all seniors, 2 juniors, and I was the only freshman. So I thought that these guys on this team were going to show me like what teamwork was all about, what teammates were all about. But that didn't happen. And what ended up happening was the 8th grade happened all over again. There was 3 guys on this team that literally made my life a living hell. They would push me around. They would say things like, you're never going to be good enough. You're never going to make it in life. This team would be a lot better if you just killed yourself. They would put shaving cream or gel in my glove. They would cut my laces on my cleats. But there was the 2 guys that became like my friend. Like, they kind of like had my back, and they're like, listen, forget whatever those guys are saying to you. Just keep doing whatever you're doing, because you're going to go somewhere in life. And they would pick me up from school. They would take me home. They would drive me around. They'd take me to parties. So I remember I got invited to this party, and this, I walk in, and there's like 50 people at this house party. And I remember I'm standing there and I'm like clinging on to these guys because I'm socially awkward. I don't know how to talk to people. And um, this pretty girl walks up to me and she says, "Hi, David." And I said, "Hi." And and she said, "You want a beer?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And I don't know who this girl is, but she knew who I was. And she cracks open this Coors Light and she hands it to me. And then like my friends like walk away from me because they're like, "Oh, hey, you got this girl talking with you. You're fine now." And I'm standing there with this beer in my hand because I haven't drank. I don't drink. I think the only time experience with alcohol I had was I had a few sips of my old man's whiskey sour at a wedding, and like that was it. And so I'm like socially awkward. I don't know how to talk to this girl, but she's like talking to me, and then she's like, "Hey, come out back with me." So we go outside of this back patio, and there's like 15 people on this patio, and everybody's in a circle, and everyone's smoking weed. And I look, and the three guys that were on my team that hated me are standing in that circle. And this war ensued in my head. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, everybody knows that I don't drink. Everybody knows that I don't smoke weed. What's everyone gonna think of me? Um, and like all this chatter is going on, and I hear nothing around me but these things in my head. And I'm like, and I see this blunt coming closer and closer to me. And then I'm like, "Oh my God, everyone knows that I'm not drinking." So I start taking some sips of my beer, and then this weed gets closer and closer to me. This girl hits it and she passes it to me. And I had already started smoking cigarettes at that time. So I hit this weed like I was smoking a cigarette, and then I did what everyone else was doing and I passed it. I did all of that for a couple important reasons. I didn't go out to that party seeking to have my first experience with smoking weed or drinking. I didn't plan that to happen. Um, But the reason why I did that is because I thought that if the guys on my team saw me partaking in what they were doing, they would say things like, "Hey, maybe he's not so bad after all, and we just haven't given him a chance, and he's pretty cool." Um, and then when those substances kicked in, um, what ended up happening was the chatter in my head stopped. It let me be who you wanted me to be. It let me feel the way I thought you felt. I wanted to look the way that you looked. And so really what I'm trying to get at is that the moral of the story is that long before I was ever addicted to drugs and alcohol, I was addicted to people's approval. And I just wanted you to like me. So anyhow, baseball season's at the end of the school year, obviously, and then those guys graduated, and then it was my turn to kind of like live my life through high school, in which I did, and I had a lot of fun doing it. Smoked a lot of weed, um, drank on the weekends with my friends. Junior year rolls around, and that is when I realized that baseball was just not going to be an extracurricular activity for me. It was going to be something that I could like go further with. Um, Junior and senior year, I was a back-to-back first team All State shortstop. I was all conference. Um, I was all East that they had in Michigan. I was on my senior year. I was selected to play on an All-American team down in Florida with about 37 other guys from around the country, and I was on the front page of the sports section of the Detroit Free Press as a top-ranked shortstop in the state of Michigan, which was actually really cool because my old man had this like scrapbook with all his newspaper clippings in it, and then I was now creating my own scrapbook, and then I started getting scouted by some pretty big universities from around the state and around the Midwest. And then when all was said and done, I signed my letter of intent on a full ride scholarship to a Division I university. And I was going to live my hopes and dreams and fulfill my life, in college. And so I did that, and I graduated with honors. And I partied that summer away at graduation parties, like a lot of kids do. My friends were all really good kids too. I surrounded myself with positive people because I was told that from a young age. I had my one best friend who was like polar opposite of me. He was ended up dropping out of high school. he's a drug dealer, what it was. He sold a lot of weed, which I thought was so cool because he always had money and I never had to pay for it. And but that summertime was kind of when things shifted and changed, and he went from selling, primarily just weed to now he was selling prescription painkillers. And I was at this another graduation party out in the country, and it's like 200 people at this massive party. At this guy had a property, his parents had property out in the sticks, and there's kegs everywhere. There's bonfires everywhere, and everyone's just having a great time. I was having a great time, and I saw my friend selling these pills, Percocets and Norcos is what he was selling. And I said, "What are you doing?" And I see people that I know personally that were buying them, and I didn't really know much about them. You got to think at this time, there's no opiate crisis, right? There's no epidemic. There's no really education surrounding these prescription opiates, and he tells me that he's selling them, and I said, "Well, I want one. People are getting high off them, and I like to get high, so I want one." And he gives me one. Now, every time that you write a prescription, we fill a prescription. Our prescription bottles a lot of the times say a lot of the same things. They have those warning labels. They even put it in the bag and staple a booklet to it that has the same warning labels and side effects. It'll say things like, "Do not operate heavy machinery. Don't take on an empty stomach. Don't take if you're pregnant. May cause dizziness or drowsiness." But I wish that at that time that it would have been able to say a lot of different things to me. Because if it would have given me warning labels and side effects, it would have said things like, "You know what, David?" It would have said, "You don't need to take me." It would have said things like, "One day I'm going to end up just ruining your life." It would have said, "One day you're going to lose everything you ever worked for and you don't even know it yet." And it would have said, "One day it's going to take you almost 11 years to walk away from this one pill." It would have said things like, "One day you're going to become severely addicted to heroin. And one day you're going to wake up and you're going to steal all your mother's jewelry and your dying grandmother's cancer medication. And your mother's going to cry herself to sleep night in and night out, not knowing whether you're dead or alive. And then one day you're going to wake up living in a rusted ass minivan on the east side of Detroit, just praying for the courage to kill yourself because you can't take it anymore." But had that pill have ever said that to me, I obviously would have laughed and discredited all of that, because that type of stuff just doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen to people like me, who is an all-state athlete on my way to college. And don't you know that my parents love me? Addiction doesn't run in my family. Alcoholism does not run in my family. Severe mental illness does not run in my family. I'm a good kid, and the list could go on and on. So I took that pill that day. I washed it down with some warm Bud Light, and I loved everything about it. Everything about that pill I loved. And I remember being like, "Well, I want to feel like this all the time." And I proceeded to party the rest of the summer away. If the pills were there, they were. If they weren't, no big deal. So I got into college. I reported for training, and I noticed that I was excessively drinking a lot at that time, and to the point to where people were now like noticing it, and they were saying things like, like, "You're like different when you drink, man." And they'd say things like, "People walk on eggshells around you. We don't know which David we're going to get today." And to me, I'm still living that party at the graduation party where everyone's having fun and I'm having fun. So I'm in training and I'm doing turf work agility drills, and I slide into second, but I misgauged how far I was away from the bag. And when I slid late, and my hand hit the bag and my wrist completely bent. And I was like, "I'm screwed. Like, this is it. I'm done." So I remember my trainers wrapped my wrist, put ice on it. I got eye black running down my face. I got my uniform on, and they take me to the doctor and they x-ray it. And the doctor says, well, I don't know how you did it, but you didn't break it. And, I don't know the severity of the damage to like the ligaments or anything, but you didn't break it. He goes, if you can get through the pain, you can probably play. Because I was like, I got to play. I can't be missing. I got to play. I got to play. And he said, well, if the pain gets to be too much, just take one of these tablets every 4 to 6 hours as you need it. And he cuts me a script for 60 Norcos. And so now the pills that I love to take recreationally, I have them prescribed to me by my doctor. And then within 5 days, all those pills were gone. And I thought to myself, well, how easy that was. And if I went to another doctor, I wonder if they would do the same thing. So sure enough, I wrapped my wrist, I put ice on it, I got eye black running down my face, I got my uniform on, I walk into another doctor, I tell him what's going on, and sure enough, that doctor writes me a script for 60 pills. And that is when I discovered the world of doctor shopping. I started going to multiple doctors, 5 doctors to be in total, all of which were giving me a prescription for 60 pills. And I was doing it for months. And then I remember it was like 3 months. I'm talking, it was the easiest thing that I ever had to do. It would take me longer to park my car and walk into the doctor's office and sign in than I was in an exam room. Doctor would walk in, hey, David, how's the pain today? Oh, well, it's still a 10, right? We got that JACO score. I remember always the sad face and the happy face. It's like a 10. And then he'd say, well, how's the team doing? What's your batting average? I'm still batting, 410. Who do you guys play next? Oh, we're taking a road trip down to Ohio. Just a series of questions, none of which are pertaining to my injury. And then he'd cut me my script, send me on my way. And so it was like 3 months of doing that. And the end of the month came. I had a week before my next appointment, and I woke up and I was like dying. I was all out of pills. And I thought I had the flu. And then what it was is that those nausea, diarrhea, restlessness, all that, as we know, those were not the flu, but I was experiencing my first round of withdrawal symptoms. And I didn't know it at that time. So I go and I call my doctor to see if I can get in because I have this flu. He gets me in. He says, yeah, you probably got the flu. So he gives me a bunch of stuff for the flu. And then he says, well, while you're here, cancel your appointment in a week. I'll give you your prescriptions now. Cuts me my script. Go to the pharmacist. I take all my stuff to the pharmacist. She fills all my prescriptions. I go out to my car. First thing I take is a handful of those, my Norcos. And within 15 minutes, those flu-like symptoms were gone. And I learned a very valuable lesson that day, and that was that I could never go without. So my life's surrounded by the seeking and obtaining. And another month goes by, and I go first of the month doctor, and I walk in, and my doctor walks in with another doctor, which never really happened before. And so I'm sitting there and like waiting for him to hand me my script and ask me my questions and send me on my way. But the other doctor says, he introduces himself and he says, David, I got a question for you. And I said, yeah, what's up? And he goes, how many doctors are you going to right now? And I looked at him and I said, well, what do you mean? I said, I'm just going to you. And he says, well, can you explain this? And he holds a piece of paper in my face, a stack of papers at that. And on that piece of paper was every doctor I ever went to, what I got filled, when I got it filled, where I got it filled. And as you all are shaking your heads that you know that they ran a maps on me. And they found out. And he said, you'll never get another pill from those doctors or our office ever again, and you can leave. And they cut me off. I didn't really realize the severity of what I was doing with, healthcare fraud and all of the stuff that goes along with doctor shopping. But I didn't stress too much about it because my best friend sold them. So I would just have to now go through him to get them. But that would mean that I have to travel a long way to get them, like an hour one way. And the thing with drug dealers is they're highly unreliable people, and they have to be on time. They have to have them. They have to answer their phone. And Matt was no different. He would call me or text me, and he's like, "Hey man, you got to come now." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm in the middle of class." And he'd say, "Well, if you don't come now, like I won't have them. They're gonna be gone." And I'm like, "I'm on the way." Skip out of class early, show up to class late. And then I quickly found out that college was nothing like high school, and that if I missed a class, I'm like weeks behind. So I missed enough classes to where I realized like I'm just so far behind, I don't even know what to do anymore. I was forging doctor's notes to show up to practice late, and then I just stopped showing up to class. And then I get a call from my coach, and he says, "Come in my office. We need to have a talk." So I get to his office. It's my head coach, my assistant coach, and the dean of student affairs. And I'm like, "Oh, this isn't good." So my coach sits me down and says, "David, what's going on?" And I'm this cocky, arrogant kid, and I'm like, "I don't know. You tell me. You're the one that called the meeting." And he's like, "We know something's going on, and we want to help you." And I was like, "Coach, I don't even know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Who is this guy?" It was the dean, which I thought less of, but it was what it was. And he said, "David," he goes, "your professors have been emailing us for quite some time now, and you're not even in class anymore. Your GPA is tanked." And I'm like, "Shit." I'm like, "They're finding out." So I quickly come up with this scene that I started crying, and I said, "Well, something's going on, and I don't know how to tell anybody yet because I haven't talked about it." He said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "My parents are getting a divorce. My parents divorced when I was 6, and they didn't buy it. So they come over to the dean, finally speaks up and says, 'I need you to read this letter and sign it and date it and let us know if you have any questions.'" And as soon as they handed that letter, I was like, "All right, well, I knew what it was," and that they were putting me on academic probation. So now I am academically ineligible to play. And I know about academic probation because there was a couple guys on the hockey team that got put on it. And your grades fall below. You sit out a season. They give you a bunch of tutors. You get your grades back up. You come back the next season. You have this you blow up, and all of a sudden you're this success story. And God, does my ego love success stories. And so I'm scanning this letter because I really don't care what it says. And I thought, well, hell, I'll get to the bottom of it and I'll read the last paragraph to make it look like I actually read it. And I read it, and I immediately realized that that paragraph let me know that it was not academic probation. Because in theory, what it says that the university had made their decision, and they had revoked my scholarship, and I was kicked out of college effective immediately. It took me 5.5 months to lose everything I ever worked for. And my first thought was not, what am I going to do now? What am I going to tell my parents? My first thought was, I'll just deal with this tomorrow. And I went to a bar that was off campus, and I got drunk, which started a whole nother monster for me known as low bottom alcoholism. I didn't really know what an alcoholic was, but it wasn't someone like me. And I finally ran out of money quick. I wasn't paying my rent anymore. And I called my mom, and I convinced my mom it was a good idea for me to move home. So I moved home, and I'm living a double life. I'm living the life of a college student athlete, and then the life of a college dropout who's addicted to prescription painkillers and alcohol. And I started experiencing immense panic attacks. Panic attacks like I can't even get out of bed. I can't breathe. I can't think. So I start looking up to talk to somebody. And ironically enough, I find a psychiatrist. And I go, and I'm a huge advocate for for mental health and for talking to people and counseling. They're only as good as for what you tell them, and they can only address what you tell them. And So I go and I needed to get honest, and I go to this woman and I tell her everything. I told her everything except for the fact that I was addicted to prescription painkillers and alcohol. So she did her due diligence as a psychiatrist, and she cut me a script for Xanax. And I didn't know much about Xanax at that time, but I knew that when I took them, it was like everything changed. I could think, I could breathe, and it was all going to be okay. And then I just started eating copious amounts of Xanax. Um, by the time I was 19, is when I was introduced to OxyContin. Yeah, I think at this time it's the middle of the early mid 2000s. OxyContin's flooded the streets, and it's everywhere. Found out that if I crushed OxyContins up and sniffed them, I got higher. It was right after that is when I started. The desperation to have those OxyContins became greater, and I started stealing from my mom, stealing from my dad. My grandmother was dying of stage 4 cancer, so I was diverting her pain medication. And I was in my bathroom, and I was sniffing an OxyContin off my sink, and my mom walked in on me, and she kicked me out. She said, "Get the hell out of my house." So I'm living at my friends' houses because their families love me and they'll take me in. And then it was their medicine cabinets, their purses, their wallets, their jewelry boxes. They kicked me out, threatened to press charges against me. And now I'm living on the streets. I'm living in my car, bouncing from motel room to motel room because my friends worked at a couple of them. Met a guy on the east side of Detroit that was selling these OxyContins for cheaper. This is now when the retail frauds start happening, the larcenies start happening. I was good at breaking into cars, so I started. Well, I wasn't that good, obviously you could tell because I got arrested a lot for doing that. And I met a guy, and I go to get my OxyContins off him. He goes, "Well, I don't have any." I go, "What do you mean you don't have any? Like, you're supposed to be a drug dealer." And he goes, "Here, take this and call me back." And he didn't have OxyContins, but he sold me heroin. And he told me if I just I said, "Well, I don't shoot heroin, so I'm good." And he goes, "You don't got to shoot it. You can just sniff it." And at 21 years old, I sniffed a half a pack of heroin, and I never sniffed another OxyContin after that. It was at 21 years old is when I became addicted to heroin. From 21 to 25, I spent most of those years incarcerated, in and out of jails, in and out of treatment centers, in and out of psychiatric hospitals. And it was just a never-ending cycle. And I would get out. This is what happens: is that I go to jail. Whatever I went to jail for, I would justify. Well, I got a DUI, or I got a drunken disorderly, so I can't be drinking. So I'm just gonna do the heroin and the opiates. And then I'm caught for stealing. Well, I can't be doing that anymore because I'm not a good thief. So I'm just gonna drink. So I would drink, and I drink to blackout, and then I have to sniff a bunch of cocaine to come off the blackout, and then I got to come down from the cocaine. So I start eating Xanax, and then all of a sudden I love Xanax, and then I start sniffing heroin again. Right? If we don't address what's actually going on with the disease of addiction, that's why recidivism rates are so high. So right after my 25th birthday, my friend had already started injecting heroin, and it was a Sunday. I had no means of getting any money. I had very little amount of heroin left on me with this $200 a day addiction. And then that was a day that I held up my arm. My friend tied my arm up and stuck a needle in my arm. 25 years old is when I became an intravenous drug user. And then right after that, my life was just out of control. I had overdosed for the first time, and I woke up and I was in a hospital, and I had this tube down my throat that was connected to this machine. I had these tubes all in me, and this nurse walks in, and she said, "Nod your head if you can hear me." And then I nodded my head, and she asked me a series of questions. She said, "Do you know where you're at? Do you know how you got here? Do you know who drives a silver sedan?" Do you know who you were with? Do you remember anything? And I answered no to all of those. I shook my head no because I didn't know. But I noticed that I had lost like 3 hours of time. And she said, you're at St. John Hospital. And she said, security had found your body outside the doors of the emergency room. She said a silver sedan had pulled up. They opened up the back seat. They pushed your body out and they drove away. Security ran out to me. They saw obviously that I had overdosed. They brought me in. They had administered 2 doses of Narcan. They put me into a medically induced coma and they put me on a vent. But then obviously the Narcan worked and they brought me off the vent and out of the coma, and there I lay. And if you don't know much about Narcan, it's a great life-saving drug. But for the one using it sucks. It puts you into immediate withdrawal. And I bet you if anybody of you have been in an ER that someone's been Narcan, they're not saying things like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for saving my life." You didn't just save their life; you just stole their high. And I felt like I just went 12 rounds with Mike Tyson in his prime. So as soon as the nurse walked out of the room, I just proceeded to rip all the tubes out of me and I checked out AMA. And then I did it again 2 days later. I had overdosed for the second time in 3 days. And I remember I got there, they had cut my shirt off. I had no shoes and no socks on, no tubes in me. And a nurse walks in and she looks at me in sheer disgust. And she said, "David," and I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "You're going to die one day." And I said, "Are you holding me against my will?" And she said, "No." She goes, "But I don't suggest you leave." And I said, she goes, "You need to get help." And I said, "I can stop whenever I want to." And she looked at me and she goes, "No, you can't." And I asked her again if they were holding me against my will, and she said, "No." And I left again, AMA. But I left that day with a different mindset. I promised myself that I was never touching heroin ever again. And within an hour of promising myself that I was never touching heroin ever again, I found myself with no shirt, no shoes, and no socks on the front doorsteps of my drug dealer's house, begging for a bag of heroin. Hands and knees begging because I had no money. No shirt, no shoes, and no socks. Those little hospital footies they give you, I had those on. And mind you, 9 years prior, I'm on the front page of the Detroit Free Press sports section as a top-ranked athlete in the state of Michigan. And now here I am with no shirt, no shoes, no socks, and I'm begging for a $10 bag of heroin. I did not know what else to do. I could not stop. And I proceeded to call my mom, and I begged my mom for help. I had talked to my parents in like, I don't know, a year and a half. And my mom gets on the phone and I said, "Mom," and she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Mom, you got to help me." And she said, "David," and she said, "I want nothing to do with you." She said, "I can't help you no more." And I said, "Mom, like I'm cold and I'm hungry and I'm going to die. I need help." And she said, "David," she said, "Do you know that I cry myself to sleep every single night?" She says, "The only time that I ever sleep is when I know that you're in jail." She says, "I can't even have my blinds open anymore because the police are at my house every single day looking for you." She said, "You need to find help yourself." And then I begged and begged and begged. And she said, "If I do anything for you, I will drive you door to door directly back to rehab. You're not living in my home." So of course I get on the phone and it's like finding treatment is extremely difficult. And I was like calling, who the hell do I call? So finally I get a hold of a treatment center. They said, "Yeah, I got a bed for you. See you in 4 hours." That's how they handled it at the time. And "Mom, I got a bed in 4 hours." She said, "All right, well, I'll drive you." That's it. So I get to her house and she said, "Go downstairs and lay down and I'll call you when it's time to go." But 4 hours when I haven't drank or used any heroin that day, 4 hours felt like 4 years. And the window of willingness is getting smaller and smaller. And this little chatter happens in my head and it says, "Hey man, you're going to be all right, you know, but you don't have to feel sick. Just go and get one more, and then we'll go to treatment. And then I'm like, no, I gotta stay. I'm not leaving. And again, this war started happening, and I was like, you could be there and back in an hour, and your mom will never even know you're gone. Do yourself the favor. And so as soon as I made up my mind that I was staying and I was doing it for real this time, I was crawling out of the basement window, and I was going back for one more. And then that one more ended up turning into 3 more years. At that time, I was 28 years old. I was living in a rusted ass minivan on the east side of Detroit, and the day was September 23rd of 2013. I remember that day so vividly because that was the day that I was going to end my own life. I was severely addicted to heroin, crystal methamphetamine, and alcohol, and I had no other options. I cried a lot that day. I obsessed over suicide because I thought to myself, when I die, this monster that I can't beat goes with me. And I wanted to kill myself, but I didn't want to hurt myself in the process. So I thought that, well, I'm just going to intentionally overdose myself. So I go and I get a bunch of heroin, and I go into an abandoned house, and I walk in this house, and there was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people in that house, which wasn't uncommon to see. And I walk into this back bedroom. It's just a disaster. And I pile up every single thing I could possibly find in front of this door that wouldn't even hinge. And I pull up all this stuff because when I fell out, I didn't want people to hear me and then come in and try to save me. And I remember I took a pull out of this half pint that I had of this cheap Mohawk vodka. And I just broke down, and I just started screaming and crying, and I didn't know what else to do. And I didn't know how I had gotten there. And then I remember I pulled out all the heroin to do it. And I remember I just I think I said, like, I'm sorry. And I put this cry out, and then all of a sudden the door comes busting down, and I fall on top of everything that I have, because whoever's robbing me is going to have to kill me. And all of a sudden I got shotguns and assault rifles in my face, and I wasn't being robbed. I was being picked up in a raid. And they were looking for me, and they found me. I couldn't keep any story straight. I had a warrant for 2nd-degree home invasion, and I was in jail again. So I'm in jail, and I'm facing 6.5 to 15 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. And that was it, cut and dry. Prosecuting attorney says, Your Honor, this man's as hopeless and as helpless as they come. Incarceration is the best option for him. And so I go back to jail. I come back in 2 weeks for sentencing. But while I was in jail, I had learned about specialty courts, like your drug courts and your sobriety courts and your mental health courts. And I found out that if you get put in those courts, they don't send you to prison. So I go back in front of the judge. He says, You got anything to say before I sentence you, Mr. Clayton? And I said, Yeah, Judge. I said, I want drug court. You would have thought, you could hear a pin drop. Prosecuting attorney goes, Absolutely not. He said, Your Honor, this man cannot do nothing right. He said, in the last 10 years, this man cannot stay out of trouble. Retail frauds, larceny, stolen checks, stolen credit cards, check forgery, embezzlement, home invasion, drunken disorderly, DUIs, receiving, concealing, stolen, everything. He cannot do it. So I got in an argument with the prosecuting attorney, and which is highly frowned upon in the court of law. And I said, You're wrong. I said, I need help. And I said, you can send me to prison because, listen, I have nothing going for me right now. Absolutely nothing. But I'll tell you what, I'll go to prison. I'll parole in 3 years. You give me 6 months and I'll be right back inside this courtroom. And the judge tells me that I got to go back to jail, come back in a week, hands me a stack of papers, says, read it and sign it. And of course, as you know, I don't really read much before I sign it. And I signed my contract into drug court. And drug court sent me back to treatment for that fifth time. Completed treatment in 21 days. First time I ever completed treatment. And move out homeless. I move into what's called sober living. And they said, well, you got to start like doing something. And I go to this meeting, right? And there's this old guy. His name is Tom T. Old school biker dude, long bow tie or braided beard, black biker vest. Tom celebrated 31 years of continuous sobriety that night. And I walked up to him afterwards and I said, Tom, I said, question for you, man, like how many times have you drank in those 31 years? And he laughed at me and he said two things to me that I'll never forget. He said, kid, he goes, don't leave before the miracle happens and just keep following me. I was like, well, I don't even know what that means, but all right. So I followed that man. I went through this drug court process, which was extremely, extremely difficult. But I found that if I stopped resisting it, it wasn't as bad. A little fact about treatment courts and incarceration. So there's roughly 2.3 million people incarcerated in the United States. 65% of those people meet the criteria for SUD. 11% of them have only ever received treatment. And then we wonder why recidivism rates are so high. Something happened to me on that September 23rd of 2013, because in my eyes, my life was supposed to end that day. But what ended up happening was my life just like was beginning, and I never even knew it. Instead of my life falling apart that day, it was all falling into place. Because September 23rd of 2013 was the last day that I ever had to use drugs and alcohol. So that means that for me, that this past September, I celebrated 7 years of continuous sobriety. And as a direct result of that, I get to do a lot of amazing things today, right? And this is one of them. When I get to speak to the future of medicine, it's probably one of the best things that I do as part of my job now. Obviously, Marissa, I told you in the beginning about the other things that I do. But when I do this because it's important, right? And I think about you guys being the future of what we see, right? Being the change that needs to happen. Because it's unfortunately that, right now, the whole statistics for 2020 aren't out yet, but I'm projecting we're going to probably be around like 83,000 deaths in the United States every single year, or that year. Well over 200 deaths related to overdoses. And right now we're in like just a terrible time, right? And because when we talk about the disease of addiction, we talk about how it needs to be treated, right? But then we don't for some reason. And I've sat amongst many of professionals that see it the way I do it, and then others that don't. So when we talk about the disease of addiction, we talk about this isolated disease, right? Addiction or alcoholism makes one isolate. And then you enter into this world of recovery and they say, hey, it's all about community, be around your people, right? They're the ones that are going to help you. COVID hits and they say, you can't be around people, you need to isolate. And then all of a sudden, that's why addiction-related ER visits are up 42%. This is why the deaths are just catastrophic right now. They take away our support, our recovery meetings, and then all of a sudden, I'm trying to maintain a level of sanity and recovery just like this. Just like this, right? Think about this, how hard it is for you guys to deal with virtual learning or to pay attention all the time. Imagine a life or death situation having to do recovery. And when I see, this is not a stab at anybody, but when I see cameras off, I see the friends that I have had that have died in the last 10 months. because some of them aren't tech savvy and they couldn't get it. I had another good friend of mine. The one friend that I speak about my story, he had died of a heroin overdose a year into my recovery. But my other friend literally held my hand in early recovery, guided me through life. And he was sober 2 years when I got sober. So every year he got sober in October and I was September. So every time I celebrated, he would celebrate the next month. And so I celebrated 7 in September and he was celebrating 9 in October. But back in July, he had this idea in his head that he could have a few drinks. And now a man that literally walked me through and held my hand, and I cried my eyes out to him because I didn't know what else to do. He can't even put together a day. He is physically dying in front of me and I don't know what to do. I cannot help him. Because you see, for an alcoholic of my variety, I don't think about September 22nd of 2013. I think about that day that I was at that graduation party having fun with all my friends. And I'm going to find that day and I'm going to go back to that day. And just because I got sober doesn't mean that everything is just like rainbows and butterflies, right? I still struggle. I have ups and I have downs. I celebrate 5 years, that Christmas, that year of 5 years of sobriety. I had an idea in my head that I was going to drink. And then my thoughts go from, you're going to drink. And I was like, well, where are you going to live? A lot of things happened. I had a relationship that was failing at that time. I had just bought my home that I live in that I never thought was ever possible. And it was like, well, where are you going to live? Because you're not going to pay your mortgage anymore. And it was like, you know what? A better idea is you should probably just go and take a drive and just jump off the overpass at I-94. And that was what was going to happen. I was going to hop in my car and I was going to drive and I was going to do that. But I had this last ditch effort and I reached out to somebody and I cried my eyes out on the phone for an hour. And I didn't have to drink and stayed depressed for like 6 months, heavy depression. And that's okay, right? Because I think about this, that when we talk about compassion, we talk about stigma, and we talk about how compassion is greater than stigma, you as the future of medicine, can have that level of compassion, because I'll tell you what, all it takes is for one of you to encounter somebody who is struggling, whether that's with severe mental illness, addiction, or they're dual diagnosed. And I'll tell you what, they're going to remember you for the rest of their lives. Because I can tell you about the officers that treated me like shit, pardon my language, sorry, that have beat me up, have called me a worthless junkie. And then I thought about the officer in the courtroom who said to me, hey man, this is it. And I said, yeah. And he goes, here. He hands me his phone. And he goes, you want to call someone and tell them you're going into treatment? And I said, no, I'm good. And not that I didn't want to talk to anybody, it's that I had no one to call. And then in treatment, they said, hey, Clayton, you got mail. And I was like, who the hell's writing me? And there was a little envelope, and there was a pack of Newports in it. And it was from Officer Tink. And me and him are great friends. I work with all the officers now and the judges and stuff. And it's definitely an awesome thing that I can do today. But if you're in a setting in a hospital and you hear people saying, why are we even Narcanning him again? He's just going to be back in a week. He's just going to be back tomorrow. What's the use? I'll tell you this much. The person that you may be witnessing being Narcan 3-4 times a week now sits in front of you today to educate you. And that in itself is when we talk about compassion being greater than stigma. Because once you break down that barrier and they are a human being. we all struggle with whatever it is that we're going through. And the minute that you break down the barrier of who it is being a doctor and a patient to a person and a person, that is when we can start making a change into things. You know, I look at it like this, right? So there's a lot of people that were on this this here conference today, speakers who have like credentials that are about this long, and I don't. But that's okay, because when we break away who we all are people who can deliver a message to you. And you know, today is a great day. You know, and in the last one, the presenters spoke a lot about why it's so hard. 1 in 3 people, I think she said, if I was paying attention, which I usually don't do, seek help. Right? Getting into treatment was so hard. And I'm going to wrap it up with this. Back in 2017, we had this idea. We sat at a table, all of us, for Families Against Narcotics. And we said, hey, what we do with education and awareness is great, but people are still dying, and they're dying at an alarming rate. How can we help more? And we heard about this thing happening in Massachusetts called PARI, Police Aided Addiction Recovery Initiative. And we said, we got to do that. So we started a program called Hope Not Handcuffs. What Hope Not Handcuffs is a police aided recovery initiative where anybody seeking treatment can walk into a participating police department without the fear of arrest and ask for help. There is a place to go. You want treatment, you go right there to the police department that's on board and you get help. Since then, we were told it's never going to work, by the way. And we've since now are in over 120 police departments in Michigan, 29 in the state of New York. We work with 10 different area hospitals in the state of Michigan. And we have placed 5,232 people into treatment. Over 5,000 people who have been given the opportunity to get the treatment they need. We don't stop there. We offer them peer recovery coaches, family recovery coaches for the families, because they're just as sick as the ones struggling. We offer grief support groups. We have a quick response team, which is a team of officers and a peer coach that will go to a residence of an overdose and say, hey, we know what happened. We want to get you into treatment now. These are the things that we keep doing, right? And now we're in this nationwide thing of like an anti-stigma and harm reduction. And we continue to grow because as with years, we continue to grow as who we are as education and as people. You know, and for what I felt when I first got sober, you know, I was like, hey, there's one way to stay sober and that's it. Who am I? There's multiple pathways. I never thought that I would be starting an SSP, a needle exchange program. There's so many things that, and so many people that I've encountered over the years that I'm blessed, you know, and I don't expect everybody to change their mindset because David Clayton from Families Against Narcotics said you should. I am just a run-of-the-mill person in recovery. It's really, but I said to myself that I remember saying it. I sat in the counseling. They said, "Hey, write down your 30-day goals, your year goals, your 5-year and 10-year." Right? They tell you to do all that, and I'm like, okay. So I make the columns, and I'm like, I'm gonna do all this stuff. And I remember writing like, I want to be happy, and I want to have a voice, and then I want to buy a house and like be happy and have a bank account. I want to be able to write checks again, stuff like that. And I did, and I remember I was moving out of my house and my mom's house at that. I moved into sober living, got a roommate with a friend that went to hell. I told my mom I was going to end up moving into an apartment, and she said, why don't you just move back home? And the last time my mom said anything about home, she said, if you come within 50 feet of my home, I'm going to have you arrested. And now I was living with her, and then she goes, hey, do you want this? And she handed me this piece of paper, and it had those goals on it. And I remember seeing it says, have a voice. And I said to myself that as soon as I have a voice, and I can be a voice of people who don't have that voice, that's what I'm going to do. And I was granted that voice, and I continue to use it today. So my name is David, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, David. This is actually the second time I've heard David speak, and it's just as good the second time around.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate how vulnerable you were in telling your story.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? I'll answer anything you have. Please,
Really
I
well.
encourage you.
Hi, I had a question. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Like, how far you come, like, we really appreciate hearing it. One question that I had was, especially, as like future psychiatrist, like I was wondering what kind of tips would you give to, be better able to, support patients who are struggling with addiction?
It's a good question. And I feel like I get that question a lot when I talk to medical students. And I think that is obviously you're doing your due diligence today by signing on and listening to this presentation. Learning, different, that there's different strokes for different folks. There's obviously not one pathway of recovery, but learning as much as you can about SUD and, knowing, kind of like a big, like holistic approach to it. And knowing that sometimes just listening is the best thing that you can do. And not sometimes we don't have to offer these grandiose ideas of how someone should handle what they're going through. Because I know for me, when I talk my things out to the people in recovery community, I end up answering my own questions, my own problems. But obviously listening and knowing that when to obviously recognize drug-seeking behavior, because I had a lot of that. But just really, knowing if someone says, I want to get treatment, I encourage you this. If someone says to you tomorrow, hey man, hey Brittany, I want to get treatment, I want you to know where you can say to go. Because if I ask a lot of you that individually, I say, hey, I want to get treatment today, what do you think I should do? And probably a lot of you are going to say, I don't know, right? Look into your local communities of what they have to offer. Look into your treatment centers of where they're at. Is there any police-aided recovery initiatives? Is there anything like Hope Not Handcuffs in that area? What can I do? Where can I send them?
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Any other questions? Please.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
And
how are you?
again, like I appreciate like this entire conversation. It was just really enlightening and powerful story.
Thanks.
I guess one thing I was just trying to figure out was just like it seemed like throughout your story, a lot of people were just like kind of passing you off to another person and not having like a real conversation. And I guess if someone isn't where they're at the point of kind of seeking help, I guess was there someone in your life that was like, all right, this is what it like needs to do and what you need to do, and it kind of like stuck in your head? Like there was that story of the nurse, but I'm not sure if that was kind of like a thing that started getting you thinking that.
Right. Well, the thing is what's cool about that is I actually go, and when I speak at some hospitals, I'll bring her along. We actually still stay in touch, which is kind of cool. But I think that obviously recovery starts upon its own admittance, right? So you can't love someone out of addiction. You can't buy somebody out of alcoholism. They have to kind of want it for themselves. But however, if there's ever that time of being someone's moment of clarity and saying like, hey, not judging you at all, but I know something might be going on. Here is this flyer. Here is these resources. And they may tell you to go after yourself, but they might keep them. And so, yeah, a lot of people, say, hey, I think you should probably go to treatment. Judges said it, bosses said it, police said it. And people always ask what was different the last time. I don't know. I think it was just a moment of like, hey, I might as well try something different. But I mean, obviously a lot of people are going to die than they are going to recover. But, I think that there's just really finding your voice to being someone's moment of clarity, and just knowing that you're a safe person to talk to and you're not there. I remember I'd walk into hospitals and I'd be detoxing, or I'd overdose and they send me to a hospital, and and I'd say, they go, how you doing? And I'm like, I want to die. Uh-oh, what'd you say? There's a hold, 72 hours. And then all of a sudden I'm on a psych hold and I'm not being addressed for actually what was happening, which I was detoxing off of heroin and I wanted to die.
Gotcha.
That's how we address things in the medical field sometimes. And it takes so many things of like, okay, well, let's peel the onion back and let's see what it is that we can do. Because a lot of times, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? That's kind of what we have to see. And there's so many people right now that I know on a daily basis, because we help with funding for people in sober living. Countywide or state funding will deny a person access to sober living funding if they have a mental health issue. What constitutes as a severe mental health issue? Depression, a suicide attempt in a hospital, a saying I want to die. You're done. That's how we address the disease of addiction with mental health. Oh, I wish I could have another hour and we could talk more.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right.
I hope I answered your question.
Oh, yeah, that was helpful.
Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question, maybe two, if you're short.
Hi,
Hello.
my name's Samantha. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I was just wondering, about your Hope Not Handcuffs work. Is there any way we can get involved or anything we can do to, be involved in that, bring it to our communities?
Yeah. So I don't know. Where are you from?
I'm actually in the Upper Peninsula.
Oh, okay. We're at UP.
Right now I'm in Sault Ste. Marie.
Oh, you should get hooked up with our Chippewa County chapter.
Okay, awesome.
So Hope Not Handcuffs. Yeah. So they need. So if you go to hopenothandcuffs.com, so right now we have in the Sioux Tribe, the Chippewa County Sheriff's Department, and the Bay Mills Police Department. We have those. Those are the three departments right now. But we need angels. And what angels are called is when a person walks into the police department, an angel is called. That's a volunteer. Medical students make great angels. And they go out to that police department, and then they're the ones that meet the participant where they're at and then help them get into treatment by making the calls with the local funding source and, insurance purposes and all that stuff. Yeah. If you go to hopenothandcuffs.com, you could email me. My email is in the flyer, david@familiesagainstnarcotics.org. And then I can put you right in touch with our director in the UP.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Got one more? Please.
Hi, I just quickly will ask something. Thank you so much for sharing. Addiction runs in my family. It cuts deep, and I just really, really appreciate your vulnerability. And I just wanted to kind of just touch on, because you talked a lot about police officers, and based off of the climate that we're living in today, and a lot of the mistrust of police officers, I just wanted to know, do you think that there's more to be said about a relationship that psychiatrists can establish with police officers, and how to have conversations about that, just because there is a lot of fear around that? And I just was wondering if you had any opinions or comments on the future for that.
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point, a very loaded question too. Yeah, we are in an extremely different time right now. And I think that, which is so crazy, because I think about all the different officers that I work with and that are just like amazing people, but then we have the bad eggs, right? I think that, they don't teach you when you go to the police academy about addiction 101 or psychiatry, right? They don't. And so really bringing in, and I foresee that happening soon. I foresee a lot where I'm doing trainings on the daily with officers. And they just don't know, right? And finding out, it's not about finding out what you know, it's about learning about what you don't know. And that is kind of where it starts. And I foresee a lot of things changing as far as more education than just, how to handle an arrest in what to do. I think it's going to run a lot deeper than that, and I think we're on the brink of something great as far as being a change. And we've been doing this for 14 years, right? I've been doing it for 7. But I think that when we're able to have, like I said, have the voice of being able to educate, that's not educating just your peers, it's educating the people that we see above us, which is law enforcement, which is the judicial system. And I think that we're on the brink of something really great. And I encourage you that if you ever get that opportunity, even just reaching out, we're still going to say, no, we're not interested, or email me. And if I have the time and I can bring you on a conversation, I'll bring you in. Anybody, we'll have a discussion. I'm open to talk to anybody.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David, as always. Like he mentioned, his email is in the conference program. So if you ever want to reach out to him, or if you need his contact information, just contact me and I will get you in touch with David.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you. I guess I'll probably never see most of you, but you know what I'm saying. Have a good day.
Bye, David.